Welcome to Bite Size Dental Marketing. Today is a special day, Mr. Albert,
Mm,
and that's
tell me.
why I'm going to take the steering wheel today,
Okay.
and I want to chat to you a little bit about the fact that it's Pain-Free Dental Marketing's 10-year anniversary and birthday. I can
There's
imagine
always been,
a lot
yeah,
of
10
thoughts going
years.
through your mind as you think back over 10 years, and I would love to give you the opportunity because it's such a great story to
Mm.
tell all of our listeners out there. Tell me the story of Pain Free, and then we can go a little bit into some of the best memories and some of the lows and what we've
Mm.
learned over the years. The floor is yours.
Like, you want the full story? Like, are we going back to 2001, 1999? Is that all right? Okay.
I want you to paint me a picture. Paint me a
The story gets
picture.
told in, various timelines, but, to string it all together, sure. There's some backstory needed. I grew up in rural Oklahoma where, the boys were raised on Copenhagen wrestling and Coca-Cola, the more true than you know. And I did all those things. Still, I gave up Copenhagen and wrestling just, because of age and health. But, I still drink, if you watch the podcast, I still have Coke Zero in my hand. No, I mean, just oral care, it wasn't as prioritized as it is today, nor is it prioritized as it is in, the suburbs and larger cities. And my mom, mid 40s, had some partial plates and dentures and things like that. Developed cancer. And there's a dentist by the name of John Broso. He had just moved into Burleson where we live. We moved to Burleson from El Reno. And he had just moved in there, and my mom was a patient. I mean, one of the early patients he had when he started his office in Burleson, and he just really cared about her. And I mean, and he wasn't a family friend. He wasn't, my mom didn't teach his kids or anything like that. He was just a dentist. And I was too young to appreciate it. I was, 22 or so. And but I remember her talking a lot about her smile. I remember her being very anxious about it because she did have a public facing job. She was very sensitive to her tooth loss and things, and especially as chemo and stuff
Mm.
ramped up, it became a big deal. And this dentist, man, just God put John Bros on my mom's path for a very specific reason at a very specific time. And she didn't smile a lot in her last year and a half. I mean, there was a lot going on there with stem cell and a lot of procedures and, flying up and down to MD Anderson and stuff like that. But this does just, he would go sit with her during chemo and, work on her partial. I mean, like just little stuff that made her so happy. And, there's not a lot of pictures of my mom today. I mean, the time frame was a different time frame, but the ones that are where she's smiling, like I think I see John, John Bros.
Mm.
So my mom passed. Now we're going to fast forward to 2014. In that gap, I was recruited out to some consulting companies. I went up to work at Procter and Gamble. I did some startups. I had a lot of marketing experience in those 14 years. And I came back 2014 to Burleson. I moved home, and I'd been home for a few years maybe. And I was sitting in the dentist chair, and I only knew one dentist, right? So, I went to the guy named John Broso, and he was prepping a crown behind me. We were just talking, and he asked me, what I did. We were catching up, and asked me about my dad, all the stuff that you would expect a dentist to do. And he said, "What are you working on these days?" And I just started talking about digital marketing, and I was telling him a story about I was working at GameStop at the time, and about how, when a mother lands on GameStop.com of a 14-year-old versus a 17-year-old, she gets a different experience of how to look at the games, how to buy the games, what content we show a 17 versus a 14-year-old, what, if you like certain genre of games, how we market to them. And he said, that's really interesting. And he just went into the story about how, life just hadn't been particularly kind to him. He was going through a divorce, which is must be incredibly hard. His staff was kind of running over him a bit. He had let some technology pass him by. He wasn't as, corporate dentistry was beginning to make its impact, and he was feeling it in there. He used to be fee for service, but he had gotten into, every insurance plan to sort of stave off this loss. of income and such. And it just, everything was not working, of course. And he wasn't loving being a dentist anymore. And he just said, can you help me? And at the time, it was funny how these things work. I think I was put in John's path because it was absolutely not the right time to start anything. Specifically not a side hustle, because Evelyn and Sophia were both, I think they had maybe just turned 2. I'd have to work out the math, but I mean, Evelyn was born in, Evelyn and Sophia were born in August and September of 11 and 12. So they were not, I think I had 2 kids under 3. I think I say 2, but I think I had 2 kids under 3 or 4, but it was hard. And my marriage was not particularly with getting married and then knocking out 2 kids and was not particularly.
It's hard enough as is. It's hard enough
it was
as
hot.
is.
Yes. Yeah, it was tough. And but of course I had to help that man. I mean, that was the man that did so much for my mom. So really, I mean, in John's story, he had, I think, 5 or 6 different vendors. I mean, he had someone doing his social media, which at the time was pretty archaic. He had someone hosting his website. He had someone, call coach. He had these someone, the person who doing the SEO was different than the website person, and he was just spending, I don't know, 3 or 5% of his production, and it was pretty trashy work, truthfully.
Yeah.
And I came in and just fired everybody, and didn't even know if I had the authority to do so, but I did. And I would work out of the office sometimes, and I would take like a personal day from GameStop and stuff like that and work. And GameStop didn't know it, obviously, but really just turn the practice around. And in many ways, I was a partner of him, that we could have business discussions around staffing and compensation. And it taught me that he wanted marketing, but he really wanted a partner, someone that he could rely on to stand up that side of the business and not have to worry about it, because it was one less thing that was denying him the joy of being a dentist, having to deal with so many, CEO focused things. And we'll tell you today, he's not a gifted CEO. He is a dentist first. Right. And really that's where it came from. Of just the one of the ideologies of ours is that we're not just a marketing company. I mean, I think if you wanted a website or you wanted something like that, you can get that done cheaper by someone else. I think, I built the company to be a partner to the dentist, and that's what I wanted to be with John. And he started killing it. Now, part of it was he was ready. I want to be clear, I didn't save him. He was ready to be saved, and he was ready for the help, and he was ready to make the investment and those things. I charged him very little in the early days, just because, again, I was paying back some karma for what he did. But as time went on, I restructured it to be a percentage of collections, and his collections grew. I mean, he went from 110, 120, which is good office when I started. But when he sold the practice, I think he was doing 270, 280 a month. A couple of years ago, he had a great growth, and I'm happy to be part of that story. And once I was running him for a couple of years, it wasn't enough money for me to live. Right, I wasn't going to make enough money on just one account. So I ended up taking a really poor job choice out in California. I thought GameStop was bad. Little did I know what I was about to get myself into. And that accelerated a lot of things in my life. Number one, I liked a work-life balance. Like, I wanted to be at home for my kids. My kids were, getting into 3, 4 at that time, 5 perhaps. And like my wife, I wanted to stay married, those things too, still do. And I began to lean heavily into looking at what the company would grow and what it would take to grow. And I hired some people. I had some early attempts at starting things. And I think, like most people, I was putting the cart before the horse. I was worried about my branding, and I was worried about everything except making the cash register ring, to be honest with you. In the early days, I made a lot of silly mistakes around, the type of person I hired, and I wanted to have a mission statement and a brand guide. I really just needed cash register.
All businesses probably go through that. I would say that's a normal thing. What is my logo going to look like?
When you're tweaking your logo instead of out there getting business, it's probably not the greatest time spent. And I went through a version of that as well. But eventually I just, one client, Rob Foster, man named Rob Foster, comes into the story very well. And he introduced me, one account became 3 and 3 became 10. And when you have 10 of something, 10 accounts, like 10, now you're sort of you got some flexibility, and you're
Mm.
also being forced to prioritize your time and things like that. And around 10 is when I decided that I was going to make a real run at like a full company. I had started a company before, but that's a whole other story. I had started a company before, and I decided I'm going to make a run, and I did. As I said, I had some early cleanup to do, if you will, of
Hmm.
some decisions I made. And there's this
At what point
Brazilian guy.
did Andre? Yeah, I was going to ask now.
Hmm.
Andre, who
Hmm.
who I know comes into the story somewhere with
Yeah,
this.
yeah. At some point around 8 to 12, I would forget the exact number, but I was reaching out to Andre beforehand. I don't want to gloss over the story. I did have two partners that didn't work out really quickly, and it just wasn't their passion. They weren't interested in it, and I had to unwind myself from that. And again, it was not difficult. There's no drama. It was just it just takes time to unwind from
Mm.
a partnership, and I had to do that too. But while doing that, I was reaching out to Andre and around, oh, can you help me build this site? Oh, can you do this for me? And I knew very early on we wanted to be close to the money in how to determine effective ROI or rate of return or value, whatever you want to call it. I knew that I wanted to be there because not a lot of marketers were there at that time in that time frame. I called Andre, and there was one person on my list, and it was him. And I've always said Andre compliments me so well. And from coming from such different places in the world, I don't know that I've met someone who complements my skills as well as Andre, just stylistically, from a work style standpoint, from a philosophical standpoint. I mean, the saying Andre grows flowers in the darkest parts of me is more true than,
Mm.
I believe anyone can imagine, even leveling me out when I'm hot on a topic or something like that. And so,
And this for someone originally from Brazil and yourself from your background, you would, if you look at it objectively, you would go, what an odd couple with how this worked out. But as you
definitely an
said,
odd couple. Definitely an odd
if you
couple.
look now at the styles and who you are as people and what you love
Mhm.
to do and focus on, what he loves to do and focuses on, how it just perfectly fills the gaps in making something a success, it makes sense now if you look back after all of these years.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm asked sometimes, my greatest accomplishment, my greatest this. If you set aside my family, Andre was the best decision I ever made in my entire life. And I would like to say I'm that good, but let's all be clear. I got lucky, and Andre's good. And I'll take that win every day, by the way. I'll take that W. But best decision I made. And from there, I mean, really, it was the company grew like many others. I mean, we were hustling hard. We were making some promises we shouldn't have made. We were, telling some lies about how big we were. And we were, like all the stuff you do when you're a young CEO of a business, and
Young
this
Thundercats coming in
young
to prove a
Thundercats
point.
running around out there,
Yeah.
and got ourselves in some trouble that we had to work hard to get out of. And, we looked around, and we were at 20, 30 accounts. And we had, I don't know, two or three people, and it started, they were like our friends and family. Like, it wasn't like we went out to LinkedIn or Indeed or anything and recruited anyone. There was a young lady that was part of the family that had just gotten a communications degree out of North Texas that I reached out to. And, it was people we knew that we were hiring. And man, I think we just kind of handshook and said, yeah, I'll pay you this. Do you want to start tomorrow? Like, there was no documents or anything like that. I mean, it was in fact, I don't think Andre had a true partnership document until we were 3 or 4 years into our relationship. The level of trust that was
Was there.
out there
Yeah.
feels crazy today, but we just started doing the work. And, we signed a lot of great clients. There were a few really rough ones in there that made us grow. And at some point we signed this, pretty good size account that I don't think they doubled their size, but I think it was like one of those, like, where one day you come in and you have 25 offices, and the next day you come in and you have like 38. We had one of those
And you're like,
moments, and
okay,
we're like, oh wow, we feel understaffed. It feels like we're not getting to all the work anymore. And it was all very fast. I mean, I do remember a funny moment where we had one of my wife's cousins working with us. We had, I think 2 people, and we were all crammed in my little office at the house. And my wife had come home after a particularly rough day of nursing, and she looked at all these cars lined up on the street, and she couldn't get into the driveway. And she came in and she kicked us out. And she's like, "It's time
This
for
is
y'all
it.
to leave. This is it. Like,
Basically,
I'm done.
get time to move out the garage. Get out the
It's time
garage
to,
right now.
yeah, it's time to move." Yeah. And we had to get our first office space because of that, which is good. I mean, we were ready, obviously. We just didn't. $480 or whatever our whatever our rent was to rent. Maybe it's $900. I don't remember, but it sounded like so much money to pay every month. I can remember it at that time. And again, it sounds silly today because I mean that's the rounding
No,
error in
but
the
back
budget
then, of
of the
course.
company. But I think it was maybe it was 800 or 900, whatever it was. Sounded like such a large number to commit to for year over year, right? I mean, but we did it, and we immediately started growing the human resources side, and we picked up some really good hires, some people that were very influential at an early stage of showing us how much someone could care about, not their company. And even though they're not with us anymore, man, I think of them. And whenever someone says Ben or Brittany's name, my heart goes to I honor them and think of them. And I'm so grateful that we got to share that chapter because they were the early day, like ride or die people. And, Greg joined and there's never been a more benevolent soul in my life than Greg. I mean, he was such a gentle person. He reminded me a lot of John Barroso, actually, just real quiet and funny and things like that. And, man, it's hard to keep a company's trajectory and personal trajectories in alignment. And they, began to want different things and moved on. And that's okay. But they were very, very instrumental in where we are today. And I don't know that they understand the impact they have on my life today for it. And the rest is really history. I mean, at some point we looked around and we had, I don't know, 15, 17 people in the organization and close to 70 accounts. And we knew pretty early on that we weren't well staffed for that number of accounts. So we really surged up. And today we've settled into a good balance of in-person and remote teams. And, we've taken a lot of lumps through the years and all, but we've always stayed true to the tenet of I want to be a partner to these offices. I don't want to be just the guy that does SEO or the person that does PPC. And if you can't be a good partner for us, I don't think we can be in business either because, that's a lot to ask from me to be a partner, but I get to be treated like a vendor whenever you feel like kicking something. And that's the story, Pain Free. And here we are, 2024. And,
10 years later.
Yeah, that's where we're at.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's there were some parts in there even that I had not heard. And I'm happy that you can share it. I did want to ask you one or two things, memories that stood out to you over the years that if I say, Eric, on this whole journey and everything that's happened, it can be two, it can be three, four things, whatever. I don't want to limit you, but what comes to mind?
I struggle with this question on so many levels. And I'll tell you why I struggle. And because I feel compelled to tell the happy stories, like the exciting stories, like the day we signed Encore, that, big practice, the day Ian came into my life. I feel, because those were big meteors hitting the world, right? Like massive events. The reason I struggle is because talking about those events without talking about the hard choices that preceded them has always made me feel.
Give me a peek behind the curtain then. It doesn't have to be the good. I would say, let me ask you this. Was there a time where we were growing at the very start and growing and things are going great and something changed and it was okay, we need to get our marbles together, or did we never have that climb, crash?
No,
what are we going to do now?
That's what I'm saying. That's perfectly well what I said. Like, I think when I hear people narrate their story like this, they like to tell the day we broke 1 million in revenue, the day we hit 3 million, all these things. They love, like, I think it's really sexy to sell the good story. The real story is, man, I went through so much heartache in trying to find the right team. And the number of people, the raw number of people that I hired and had to part ways with, and they meant something to me, to find the team I have today was not free. And it was way more work and way more heartache than I expected. I picked up a book, How to Have Hard Conversations. And I think for me, the sexy, fun stories do a disservice, if you will, to the sacrifice that Andre and I had to make at that point. There was a time in 2017, 2016 that we were growing very fast, and my marriage was not growing that fast, to be honest, and I wasn't putting enough time into it. And man, I ran on some hard times, and I can tell you a
And I'm
story
sure
about
Andre
how
has his own version of going through something like
he
that
does.
too.
He does.
I mean,
Yeah.
you've said to me a few times it gets lonely at the top, and people
Yeah,
think
I
it's
didn't.
fairy tale,
And
but it gets tough.
and it took me longer than I would like to admit that. People don't care about your hard work. Like, they don't care what it took for you to get here. They don't care about your sacrifices and your stuff. They just see the success, that you've had. And they think it was overnight, because to them it was, right? When you joined the company, we were already, 1.8, 2.4 million. I mean, somewhere around there. We were a sizable organization, and you saw success, and you don't remember the time that Andre and I had a spreadsheet that calculated how quickly we were burning cash and when we were going to run out of money in the early days. And like, just it sounds silly to say today,
A doomsday clock,
but
if you will.
a doomsday clock, if you will, of like,
Yeah.
when we needed a new account by this day, we were going to run out of money.
Yeah.
And I want to tell the good stories around the story of Ian and the first time we took the company down to Mexico for a vacation. Those are all great stories, and they're fun stories. The day we shut the company down and went to the fair, we only did that because we surrounded ourselves with people who were incredibly mission driven, who were zealotry was very high for the company. And those sacrifices, and I don't mean the sacrifices I made personally, but the sacrifices Andre made, the sacrifices those first tranche of employees made, how hard they worked, what they meant, and the passion that they worked, really laid the foundation of today's company in so many ways. And when I'm asked, tell me the highlights, tell me the highs, I don't know why. Something in my personality goes to the sacrifices it took to have those highs, and I celebrate them. But I think talking about the first trip to Mexico in, was it 2018, 2019, around then, yeah.
Yeah.
Without talking about the challenges of standing up a staff on a shoestring budget, of how do you balance keeping people happy with paying my own bills, with because it's not like I was ahead of my retirement at that time. And,
Yeah.
knock on wood, I'm not I'm not as where I want to be exactly today either. But it's not like I didn't have personal ambitions to make money either. And as I've said earlier, I had kids and wife, and they had ambitions as well. And to me, the journey has been the most amazing journey ever. And I love all the good stories, but it has been harder and longer than I would have expected. But it was a labor of love, and I enjoy doing it. And
Isn't that the real story, Eric? As you said, now your mind goes to, people want to hear we hit 1 million, we hit 2 million, we hit 3 million. But I think those happen quick, and they're a dopamine and a quick celebration. But the true story of Pain Free and Eric Hubbard and Andre Santos, and what you look back on, and the real pride is, man, I hit complete rock bottom a few times in trying to figure this out, and we're still standing. And isn't that the true success story in who we are as people?
I think it is. I mean, I think honoring the highs without talking about the lows is not authentic, to use the buzzword of our time right now, which, I despise. But yeah, I mean, you said it. I've been in marriage therapy now 3 or 4 times. And again, I mean, we're holding on, buddy. We're doing all right. Andre and I've had fights, and through it all, I get all emotional about this topic. It's not been easy, and I don't want to sell it as the greatest sacrifice ever, but I think we we judge ourselves by our lows sometimes, and I know that may not be incredibly mental healthy, but I think we default to it. And it's been such an amazing journey over the last 10 years, but it's been hard fought. Not the least, I mean, I love dentists; they're great, but none of them were excited about paying a marketing bill on March 17th of 2020.
Yeah.
And our revenue went from a couple 100,000 a month to zero for about 60 days. Now again, I can tell you that we were making calls to dentists saying, hey, don't worry about your invoice, because we knew they weren't going to pay it anyway. Let's be clear, it was not completely altruistic. Hey, don't worry about your invoice, we're still working hard for you. We kept the team. We made a lot of things that were good moves then, but we kept the team intact. I said, don't worry about your invoice this month, and thanks. And I called Brent Cornelius, Sky Creek Dental. He wasn't Sky Creek at the time, but he is now. And I said, hey, Brent, we know you're shut down, and don't worry about your invoice. And he said, no, I'm going to pay my invoice if you don't mind, because this is when I need my marketing team. He said, but I got to go. And he hung up. And of all the calls I made that day, I remember Brent.
Goosebumps.
And I think that's where,
because that's the kind of guy he is too. I mean, I know him by now. Like that is Brent.
Yeah, that's where I can tell you the great story of Brent Collin. But if you don't see that, that's the day I gave up. I don't know, man, 180 somewhere. A lot of revenue that day. A lot of revenue that day was not coming into the company, and that was scary because I had committed to keeping the team intact pretty early on in COVID, and then to lose all this revenue, which obviously we didn't know we were going to lose. And
I know you even adjusted. You had said we're going to reduce monthly salaries by a certain percentage, but we still want to try and give you guys an opportunity to work. We'll make Fridays optional, and we'll honor that if people come in. Like I know, because my wife Hannah had been working at Pain Free during that time, even before I was there. And I remember her just saying, like, and that's also a testament to the type of company that Pain Free is. Like, she was like, yeah, they're not going to let anybody go during this time. They said they're going to stick to reducing salary, but still trying to keep us afloat, that we can work extra days if we wanted to, which that's highs again. In that, I know maybe at the time for the company, but looking back now, having taken that cultural decision was just another foundation of this is who we are.
Yeah, and Andre and I stopped our salaries. We cut the staff salaries by 20%, and we made Fridays optional. And and we said we would pay the Friday back. Everyone, if you worked Friday, you put your name in on a spreadsheet, not a jar, but And then as we recovered, we paid them back. But there was a time we didn't know we were going to recover. I mean, just a lot of agencies at our size didn't survive coming through COVID. And now, for the record, because we kept our staff, obviously that I forgot what the loans that we didn't have to pay back were. Obviously a chunk of money was injected into the company with COVID reliefs and things like that we took advantage of. And we got to, because we didn't lay off our staff. So certain things like that. But yeah, I mean, the good stories, that those cultural decisions we made, the real story is Andre and I came from a tech background, and we picked up a sizable project on the side. I think it was about $150,000 project on the side to build a website for a guy. And we worked on it at night. So the real story is, it's sexy to say we did this and this and this, but like we had to go out there and side hustle our company, in fact. So we grabbed Saria and a couple other folks, and we built a totally unrelated website in the banking space to shore up the company's income during that time to pay the people that we had promised money at a time when we weren't being paid. So I was doing my job here at a moment of crisis, and then I was out there project managing the site that Andre was building. And again, that's one of those, I was not paying attention to Mrs. Hubbard, and Andre wasn't paying attention to his girlfriend at the time, and I don't want to make it about me. I know that, as I tell that everyone made sacrifices during that time to keep the company. I mean, and from the people we talked about earlier to the people today, I mean, you've made sacrifices to onboard clients and such at a time when you also had things going on in your personal life. And, the thing I'm most proud of is, we've all built something worth fighting for.
And exactly what you're saying there, and what I looked up to, and why I made the sacrifice I did, we can go down the list. Sorry, Kristen, any of the new team members that came, we all have our story, but we're all grounded in this is the type of company, this is the history of this company, and the culture of this company, and why we do things the way we do. So, but with the highs and the lows, you have cemented a foundation in this company that will live on. I thank you so much for coming to talk to me today and telling your story. Every time it's such a beautiful story to hear. And here's to Pain Free with the highs and the lows, and cheers to 10 years.
To 10 years. Good job. Thanks for having me on the show.
Of course.